next speaker is Dan Markowitz. Dan is an animator, editor, and writer whose award-winning short films used to play at international film festivals until he had 2 kids. He's currently a designer and educational app Super Teacher. Really cool, check it out, especially if you have young kids. Dan enjoys puns, storytelling, describing himself in the third person. And for those of you who were here for Stories in the Sukkah, he may or may not have been on Double Dare. You can ask him that story later. Dan is going to be giving a TED Talk, talking TEDs throughout history from best TED to worst TED and everything in TED Tween. So Dan Markowitz, everyone.
Sorry, hold on, everybody. 1 sec.
Just drop that.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
All right, great. And cool, let's move over. All right, thank you all for coming to my TED Talk. TED Talk. It's gonna be a history, analysis, and ranking of TEDs. First, do we have any TEDs or Theodores, Teddies in the audience right now? No, nobody, all right. None of you are gonna be on the list anyway, so. All right, we'll be rating each one on a score from 1 to TED. TED being the highest. And this will span everything from the good, Ted Lasso, to the bad, Ted Lasso season 3. And yeah, let's just get started. This is the top TED list. All right, so coming in at number TED, we have Teddy Ruxpin. Did anybody have one of these when you were a kid? Yeah. All right, it was a talking toy from the 1980s. It was a little teddy bear. I've never had one. You squeeze it and it talks? Is that what happens exactly? Or just, you put it down and it just talks to you anyway. It was pretty revolutionary. It had like a cassette inside, and one of the cool things was the mouth would sync as it was talking, so it looked pretty realistic. But it loses a few points because it could get pretty creepy when malfunctioning. This is what it looked like on the inside. And also paved the way for other terrifying things like Furbies in the 90s. So, end of the day, Teddy Ruxpin on the score of 1 to TED, like 1.1 maybe. And we're only gonna get better from here. So, coming in at number 9, we've got Ted Turner. Not a revolutionary talking bear from the 80s, but he created the first 24-hour news network. But on the other hand, he created 24-hour news, so loses a few points there. On the bright side, he was a philanthropist. He donated a lot of money to the UN. Teddy Ruxpin never did that. He also, I found out he raced yachts competitively, which sounds like the most boring, slow race I can think of. So not doing so well. Maybe a 2.3 out of TED out of there. Feel free to disagree with me if anybody feels differently. Keep going to number 8 on the TED list, Ted Logan. Does anybody know who this is? Yes, all right. This is Ted from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Yes, Theodore Logan, but it's a Ted, he's a Ted. He was memorably played by Keanu Reeves. By all accounts, a really wonderful, nice guy in Hollywood. Adventure was pretty excellent, so he gets some bonus points for that. Loses a few points because his journey was bogus. The sequel, for anybody who doesn't know. There was also a third one that came out recently. I didn't see it. They look very old in it. But he also loses points. He doesn't stand on his own. Nobody's going to go see Ted's Excellent Adventure. He kind of needs Bill around, and this is not a Bill talk or a Bill and Ted talk. This is just a TED talk. So put in at like 2.7 out of 10. Not bad, we're getting better. All right, number 7, we have Ted Danson.
Yeah.
Understand.
All right, yeah, pretty good, Ted. Getting some good response there. He's the star of Cheers, also on The Good Place, which is another excellent show. He's an environmentalist. He's going around saving the ocean right now. He's great on Curb, where he plays Larry's nemesis. Less great at the Friars Club in the 90s, which he probably doesn't want you to Google or learn anything about. So you can put him at like 4.1 out of 10. All right, number 6. We've got Ted Shackelford. Does anybody know who this one is? That's actually the name of the man in the yellow hat. From Curious George. He's a Ted. Not a lot of people knew that. Yep, man in the yellow hat. He's a Ted. He cares for George, which is very kind of him. Because George is kind of a hot mess sometimes. It's like a classic actual picture of George passed out after swallowing a bottle of ether. I've never read that book for a kid, so I don't know what goes on in that one. He did kidnap George from the jungle, though, so loses a few points for that. Also loses a few points because not everybody knows his name. As Ted Danson, he would not be invited to the bar for Cheers. So what is that, like 5.2, I think. I'm kind of estimating these scores here. Non-scientific. This is not a poll done, this is just me. Keep going to number 5, Ted Kennedy, yeah? Pretty good Ted. He fought for civil rights and healthcare. He's another Kennedy who has very strong opinions about healthcare. He was known as the Lion of the Senate, which is a pretty awesome nickname. Also, there's the Chappaquiddick thing, which also probably don't want you to Google that. But loses a few points for that. He's at around like 6.5 out of 10. All right, number 4 on the TED Talk Top TED list is Ted Stryker. People know who this is? I heard a few things out there. Yep, I Am Serious, Don't Call Me Shirley. He was the star of Airplane, which is my favorite movie. He was able to successfully land the plane, which in the past few months has seemed harder and harder. But he's not as good a pilot as an autopilot, so gets docked a few points for that. So that looks like maybe a 7.7 out of 10. All right, number 3, we've got Ted Williams, baseball player. He was a Hall of Famer. Last MLB player to hit 400, according to Wikipedia. I'm not a baseball expert. John, I don't know if you can vouch this, but sure.
Great time.
Yeah, pretty good. He played for the Red Sox and famously hated Boston. Was constantly getting into fights with reporters about it. I read a story online. He infamously spat at the his own fan in the stadium as he was going down to the dugout. They booed him, so he came back out of the dugout and spat on them a second time. He was also cryogenically frozen after dying. And interesting, I found out he is actually, his head and body are currently being kept in 2 separate places. This is true, apparently. Kept in 2 separate places, frozen 2. And I think I have an artist rendering of what that looks like. So that's Ted Williams. Give it an 8.2 out of 10. All right, number 2 is Ted Flanders from The Simpsons. He's also kind of looks like Ted Lasso, interestingly. He's kind-hearted. He's very spiritual. He's surprisingly ripped. Loses a few points because that's a typo, and his name's actually Ned Flanders. So that means he gets a 1 out of 10. But if this was a Ned talk, then definitely a Ned out of Ned for that one. All right, and coming in at number 1, are there any guesses?
Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt. Summerline.
Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah. Maybe loses a few points because he was usually called Teddy Roosevelt, not Ted Roosevelt, but still number 1, Ted. He was the 26th president. He was a champion of conservation and national parks. Loses a few points because he spoke softly. Gains a few points because he carried a big stick. So if you got like a frisbee stuck in a tree or something, he could help you out with that. He was actually the inspiration for teddy bears. Teddy bears are named after him. But loses a few points because that also means he was inspiration for teddy bears. But still, end of the day, gotta give him a Ted out of 10. Got a few honorable mentions out there. There's a lot of Teds out there. Another famous Ted is Ted. The movie Ted by Seth MacFarlane, creator of Family Guy. In addition to that, another famous Ted is Ted 2, which is the sequel to that. And who can forget Ted, the spin-off TV show that launched on Peacock recently, which means that nobody on Earth has actually seen it before. Oh, somebody's seen it. Somebody has watched Ted. One of the Teds. Of course, there are a few Teds who aren't so great. Ted Cruz. Theodore is one of Alvin and the Chipmunks. Technically a Ted. But also near the bottom, Ted Bundy, not a good guy. Ted Kaczynski, Ring of Honor. And last and least, in the spirit of an anticlimactic and disappointing ending, is Ted Mosby from How I Met Your Mother. So, thank you for coming.